The wind whipped through the trees of the vast Appalachian Territory, a mountainous region of the United States known for its dense forests and legends that span generations. Deep in the heart of that green wilderness, small rural villages clung to existence, far removed from modern civilization, where the nights belonged to the howling of wolves and the rustling of the undergrowth. It was in one of these villages that Samuel Grayson, a forensic biologist specializing in wild animals, arrived searching for answers. He'd been called in by an old friend from the Forest Service, who told him about a string of bizarre incidents terrorizing the locals. Something or someone had been destroying crops, raiding barns, and leaving behind gigantic footprints, along with reports of an indescribable creature. "Samuel, I know it sounds crazy, but these tracks are almost twice the size of a human foot, and the old-timers in the village swear they've seen an ape. A huge ape, but with human-like features," said Ethan Coleman, the head of the local forest patrol. Samuel, used to debunking legends with science, gave his friend a skeptical look. "Ethan, you know this kind of thing usually has a logical explanation. Bears, for example, can leave some pretty strange tracks depending on the ground. And as for the appearance, well, fear can play tricks on people's minds. I thought the same thing, man, but I saw the tracks with my own eyes, and the village is genuinely terrified." And before we get any further into this intriguing story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps us to bring you more content like this. Now, let's get back to the story. Weariness was etched on Ethan's face. He'd been serving this area for 20 years, but he'd never seen anything that made the villagers lock their doors at night with such fear. The worst part was that, in recent weeks, farm animals had started disappearing, and just last night, a local farmer swore he'd seen the creature prowling around his property. Samuel decided to investigate on his own. The next day, he visited Thomas Wilkins's farm, a man of almost 60, with weathered features and eyes marked by sleeplessness. He was armed, distrustful, and his dog Rex, a trained German shepherd, refused to leave the porch, growling towards the forest. "Doc, it ain't a bear. It ain't a wolf. I've seen all sorts of critters out here, but this was big. Walked on two legs like a man, but had long arms hanging down to its knees. The face, damn thing, had a face almost human." Thomas spat on the ground, as if to get rid of the bitter taste of his words. Samuel knelt near the corral and examined the marks in the soil. Sure enough, enormous footprints were there, sunk deep into the earth. They looked like they belonged to a primate, but there weren't any apes that size in North America. With each clue found, science struggled against the unexplainable. As night fell, Samuel decided to stay at Ethan's cabin near the edge of the forest. He wanted to see for himself if something was really lurking around the village. The moon was high when a deep guttural sound echoed among the trees. It was a roar, but not from any known animal. Samuel grabbed his binoculars and pointed them towards the forest's edge. His heart skipped a beat. Among the shadows, a gigantic figure was watching the cabin. And then it moved. Samuel felt his blood run cold. The silhouette moving among the trees was gigantic, its height close to 10 feet, and its long arms swung oddly as it moved slowly forward. The faint moonlight highlighted its grotesque outline, a creature covered in thick, dark fur, but with a face that, even from a distance, revealed something disturbingly human. He instinctively reached for his camera, trying to capture some evidence, but his hands were shaking. Ethan, who was inside the cabin, heard the creaking of the wood as Samuel took a step back. "What is it?" Ethan asked, grabbing his rifle. Samuel couldn't answer right away. The creature stopped for a moment, turning its face in their direction, as if it knew it was being watched. Then it let out a deep roar that made the hairs on the back of both of their necks stand on end. Outside. "There's something out there, Ethan." The patrolman ran to the window, and as soon as he saw the monstrous silhouette, his expression hardened. "My God, it's real!" Before they could react, the creature disappeared into the darkness of the forest. The sound of branches breaking under its weight continued to echo for a few seconds until everything went silent again. "This is impossible," Samuel finally managed to say. "There aren't any primates that size here." "I told you, Sam. Whatever that is, it's not normal." The night was long. The two stayed awake, listening to every little sound coming from the woods, but the creature didn't return. At dawn, Samuel decided to investigate the footprints left in the soil. And what he found only deepened the mystery. The footprints were deep and wide, but the strangest thing was that they didn't lead anywhere. They appeared at the edge of the forest and simply disappeared at one point, as if the creature had dissolved into thin air. Samuel took photos and tried to analyze the depth of the marks. The creature was heavy, much more than a human, but if there were no traces leading into the forest, where the hell had it gone? That's when Ethan remembered something. "Sam, there's something you need to see." The two headed to a more remote area where the ruins of an old abandoned mine stood. Decades ago, the place had been closed due to mysterious collapses that killed several workers. Many bodies were never found. The old folks in the village say that things move inside those caves at night. Some believe that something got trapped down there. Samuel turned on his flashlight and pointed it towards the dark entrance of the mine. Something inside him said that the answer was there. But before they could enter, a distant scream echoed through the forest. It was a human scream, full of despair. Samuel and Ethan exchanged glances. Someone was in danger. Without thinking twice, they ran towards the sound. Samuel and Ethan raced through the woods, dodging branches and fallen logs as the desperate scream echoed among the trees. The sound was shrill, full of fear and pain. Someone was being attacked. Ethan held the rifle firmly, his eyes scanning the dense undergrowth. Samuel tried to keep pace, but the uneven ground made every step a challenge. The scream repeated, but now it seemed weaker. "It's coming from the ravine!" Ethan shouted, pointing to a narrow gorge ahead. They reached the edge of the ravine and saw the scene that made their hearts stop for a moment. A young man, no more than 20 years old, was trapped between the rocks, his eyes wide with pure terror. But it wasn't the fall that terrified him. It was what was above him. The creature was there, gigantic, crouching on the edge of the ravine, its long arms hanging forward, its immense hands with elongated, thick fingers. Black fur covered its muscular body, but it was when it turned its face towards Samuel and Ethan that the scene became even more terrifying. The face was human. Not completely, but there were undeniable traces of humanity in its expression. The deep-set, dark eyes, the wide mouth, the flat nose. It looked like a grotesque mixture of man and primate. And then the creature growled, showing sharp fangs. "Hey!" Ethan shouted, raising the rifle. "Get away from him!" The beast turned its head slowly, as if analyzing what to do. For a moment, Samuel had the impression that it understood, but without warning, it let out a deafening roar and took a step forward. "No!" shouted the young man, trying to move even further away from the edge of the cliff. The creature raised one of its arms and grabbed the boy by the leg, as if he weighed nothing. "My God," Samuel murmured. Without thinking twice, Ethan fired. The sound of the shot exploded in the forest. The projectile hit the creature's shoulder, which let out a guttural scream, a mixture of pain and rage. Its eyes were now pure hatred. It dropped the young man, who rolled down the ravine and fell with a dull thud on the rocks. But instead of fleeing, the creature advanced against the two men. Ethan fired once more, but now the beast was already upon them. With a brutal blow, it hit the patrolman's chest, throwing him against a tree. The rifle flew away. Samuel barely had time to react before the creature raised its hand and grabbed him by the collar of his shirt. Its face was inches from his. The smell was strong, animalistic, but there was something in the creature's eyes, something that seemed human. Samuel couldn't breathe. "What the hell are you?" he managed to whisper. For an instant, the creature seemed to hesitate. Its mouth opened as if trying to say something. But then a distant noise echoed from the abandoned mine. The beast immediately released Samuel and turned around. Then it ran towards the black hole of the cave and disappeared into the shadows. Samuel fell to his knees, gasping for air. Ethan groaned in pain, trying to get up. The young man they had tried to save was unconscious, but alive. Samuel looked at the entrance of the mine. The creature came from there, and that meant that inside there might be more of them. Samuel tried to catch his breath, his mind still processing what had just happened. Ethan crawled to get up, holding the side of his body where the creature had hit him. The young man they had rescued was unconscious, but breathing. The silence that settled after the creature's escape was almost as frightening as its presence. It had entered the mine. "There are more of them in there," Samuel said, staring at the dark mouth of the cave. Ethan nodded, his face contorted in pain. "I think I just broke a couple of ribs, but for God's sake, did you see that thing?" Samuel didn't answer immediately. The creature's face remained in his mind. That wasn't a simple animal. Before they could discuss further, a weak moan caught their attention. The wounded young man stirred. Samuel and Ethan approached. Hey, take it easy. You're okay," Samuel said, trying to calm him down. "What's your name?" The boy blinked a few times, dazed. His face was scratched, his arms covered in bruises from the fall. Danny, he choked out. "It got me. It was going to take me." Ethan and Samuel exchanged glances. "Take you where?" Ethan asked, his voice firm. Danny breathed with difficulty. His eyes turned to the entrance of the mine. "In there," he swallowed hard. "It got me, but it didn't kill me. Carried me into the forest. I tried to escape, but it didn't hurt me. It was like it was deciding what to do with me." Samuel frowned. "It could have killed you instantly, but it didn't." Danny nodded. "It smelled me, looked me in the eyes, like it recognized me." A shiver ran down Samuel's spine. The creature hesitated with him too. Ethan got up with difficulty. "That means it has intelligence. It's not just an animal acting on instinct." Samuel looked at the mine again. "And the only way to find out what's really going on is to go in there." After taking Danny back to the village and making sure he would receive care, Samuel and Ethan returned to the mine. Ethan was still limping, but he wouldn't admit to giving up. The mouth of the cave was a dark hole, like an entrance to something that should never be discovered. "Are you sure about this?" Ethan asked. "No, but we need to go in." They turned on their flashlights and advanced inside. The air soon became colder, and a strong metallic smell filled the place. The smell of damp earth and something else, something rotten. The main tunnel descended in a spiral, the old mining rails still visible under the dust accumulated over time. The mine had been closed more than 50 years ago after a mysterious collapse that killed several workers. But now it seemed more alive than ever. As they descended, they heard distant noises, heavy footsteps, breaths. Something was down there. And then they turned a corner and saw it. A wall of bones. Human and animal skulls were piled up, forming a kind of macabre altar. Many were broken, the bones gnawed as if something had fed on them. And then a deep sound echoed through the cave. It wasn't a roar, it was a voice. Samuel felt his heart leap. Something was talking down there, and they weren't alone. The underground tunnel was colder than any place Samuel had ever been. The air was heavy, dense, laden with the strong smell of damp earth, and something worse, iron and rot. But that wasn't what made his body stiffen. What froze his blood was the voice. Low, guttural, something that resonated through the walls of the cave like a deep whisper. It was unintelligible, but clearly humanoid. "Did you hear that?" Ethan murmured, holding his rifle tightly. Samuel just nodded, unable to take his eyes off the wall of bones in front of him. The structure was a kind of altar, a macabre pile of human and animal skulls, organized ritualistically. But what caught his attention most was the size of some of those skulls. They weren't human, and they weren't from any known species of primate. There was something very old there. My God. Samuel murmured, approaching, and then the sound returned, this time louder, closer, and it wasn't just one voice. There were several. Samuel and Ethan turned at the same time, pointing their flashlights into the darkness of the tunnel ahead. The sound of heavy breathing increased, along with dragging footsteps. Something, or several things, was coming. "We have to get out of here," Ethan whispered, his eyes wide. Samuel knew it was too late. The light from their flashlights caught a strange glow in the darkness. Two luminous points, eyes reflecting the light. And then another pair appeared, and another, and another. They were surrounded. From within the darkness, the creatures emerged. They were enormous, of immense stature, but each one slightly different from the other. Some were more robust, others thinner, but all had the same frightening trait. Their faces possessed human characteristics, deformed and mixed with primitive traits. The deep-set eyes shining in the dim light, the wide mouths with irregular fangs. And they were all looking at Samuel and Ethan. And then she appeared, the biggest of them, the one that attacked them before. She approached slowly, her steps reverberating through the cave, and stopped a few feet from Samuel. Her broad chest rose and fell with heavy breathing, as if she was analyzing him. Samuel felt dread, but also something he couldn't explain. The creature didn't attack immediately. On the contrary, she raised her hand and then pointed to Samuel's chest and spoke. The voice was distorted, guttural, difficult to understand, but there was a word there. "Home." Samuel's eyes widened. "What did she say?" Ethan murmured, his voice almost a whisper. The being repeated, this time more clearly. "Home." Samuel felt a shiver run down his spine. "Home," he translated. "House." Ethan looked at him, confused. "House. What does that mean?" Samuel didn't know. But before he could try to answer, a new sound came from the depths of the cave. A loud, non-human scream. The creatures reacted instantly, raising their heads and grunting in response. The leader, the beast that attacked them before, turned to the depths of the mine and let out a roar. And then Samuel saw something he didn't expect to see: fear. The creatures were afraid. "There's something else in there," Samuel whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. "If even these monsters are scared, I think it's time for us to get out of here." But Samuel took a step forward. "No, I want to see what's in there." Against any instinct of self-preservation, Samuel walked slowly into the cave while the creatures moved away. They didn't want to go any deeper. Ethan cursed softly, but followed Samuel, rifle in hand. The tunnel narrowed and the light from the flashlights illuminated something that shouldn't be there. A metal door. Samuel stood still. It wasn't something natural. It was built. He ran his fingers over the cold surface. The metal was corroded by time, but there, between layers of dust and rust, there was something engraved. Samuel cleaned the surface and felt his stomach turn as he read the words. Project Gargoyle, 1952. Property of the United States government. His heart raced. He looked at Ethan, who was pale. "This is government stuff," Samuel murmured. "These creatures, they're not legends." Ethan swallowed hard. They were created. Before they could fully process what that meant, the cave shook, and then a deafening roar echoed from the other side of the door. Something even more dangerous was in there, and now it knew they were there. The cave trembled again. Small stones fell from the ceiling as a deep roar echoed from the other side of the metal door. Something gigantic was in there, something that should never have been released. Samuel felt his heart pounding. What the hell was Project Gargoyle? Ethan took a step back, his eyes fixed on the rusted structure. "Samuel, this stinks of government stuff. This isn't natural." Samuel took a deep breath. He knew Ethan was right. The creatures they found in the cave, the giant apes with human features, seemed like an aberration of nature. But now, standing before that door forgotten in time, he understood that it wasn't just a simple legend. It was a human creation. And whatever was behind that door, the very creatures that inhabited the cave were afraid. Another roar echoed, louder this time. The ground vibrated under their feet. "We have to get out of here," Ethan said urgently, but Samuel couldn't move. His eyes ran over the corroded surface of the door. Something was wrong there. The structure didn't just look closed, it looked broken, and that's when he saw it. Scratches, deep marks carved into the metal, as if something monstrous had been trying to get out of there for decades, and perhaps recently it had succeeded. Samuel swallowed hard and touched the door. The metal was cold, even in that humid environment. He cleaned a little more of the rust and found something else. Worn words, almost illegible. Containment Protocol, Level 5. Subjects 001-008. Status, experimental. Objective, hybridization and genetic enhancement. Samuel's stomach turned. Hybridization? My God, Ethan cursed. This is military stuff. They were trying to create something. Before they could process, a new crash shook the cave, and then a metallic sound echoed. The door moved. Samuel jumped back as an agonizing screech cut through the silence. Something on the other side was trying to open the door, and then it gave way. The door opened slowly, exhaling a putrid, musty wind. Samuel's flashlight trembled in his hand as he illuminated the interior, and what he saw made him want to run away immediately. There was a huge room behind the door, covered in debris, destroyed scientific equipment, crushed containment cages, battle marks on the walls. And then, at the back of the enclosure, something moved. Ethan raised his rifle, but froze when the thing emerged from the shadows. It was much bigger than the creatures they had found before. It was almost 13 feet tall. Its body was a grotesque mixture of muscles and scars, covered in sparse hair. But the worst thing was the face. It was almost human, but it wasn't anymore. The mouth was too wide, filled with sharp teeth. Its eyes were different from the others. They no longer had that gleam of intelligence. Only hunger. Samuel felt pure terror. They had just awakened something that should have remained asleep. The monster let out a deafening roar, stirring up dust and debris. The smaller creatures, which had previously seemed dominant in the cave, grunted in fear and ran into the shadows. "They're hiding!" Ethan yelled. "My God, even they're scared of this!" Samuel grabbed Ethan's arm. "Run! Now!" The ground shook as the monster advanced. It was fast, very fast. Samuel and Ethan dashed through the tunnel, flashlights swaying, as the sound of the creature's heavy footsteps chased them. The way back seemed endless. Samuel heard a dull thud behind him. The monster had hit the cave wall, knocking down huge stones. The tunnel began to collapse. "We're not going to make it!" Ethan shouted, panting. But then something unexpected happened. From the shadows, the smaller creatures emerged. The giant ape men. They weren't fleeing. They were waiting. And when the colossal monster approached, they attacked. They jumped on it, sinking claws and fangs, emitting war roars. Samuel and Ethan didn't stop to watch. They kept running, dodging falling debris, until they finally saw the exit of the mine. Light, fresh air. But before leaving, Samuel looked back. The monster was fighting fiercely against the smaller creatures, but it was too strong. One of the smaller beasts was torn in half. And then, Samuel realized, they weren't trying to kill the monster. They were holding it in there. They wanted it to never come out. Samuel left the cave in time to see the entrance collapse completely, burying everything inside. Silence. The sun was already rising when Samuel and Ethan fell to their knees, exhausted. The terror had finally ended. Hours later, the entire village learned of the collapse of the mine. For the residents, that was the end of the curse. Samuel knew the truth. The real monsters were never legends. They were created. The government played with nature and paid the price. But the biggest question continued to haunt Samuel. Did they really die in there? Or one day would the caves give way again? He would never have that answer. But something said that the nightmare wasn't over yet. The sun rose over the Appalachian Mountains, painting the sky with orange hues. Samuel was sitting on the porch of Ethan's house, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He couldn't sleep. The sound of the mine collapsing still echoed in his mind. The monster's final roar. The sacrifice of the other creatures to prevent it from escaping. Everything seemed like a nightmare, but he knew it was real. Ethan came out of the house, still limping. His ribs were bandaged, and his face bore the signs of the fight in the cave. But despite his injured body, his gaze was sharp. "Still thinking about it?" he asked, sitting down next to Samuel. Samuel let out a heavy sigh. "How can I not?" Silence hung for a moment. The wind swayed the trees around the house. The smell of wood wet from the morning dew brought a false sense of peace, but Samuel knew the truth. Evil never disappears completely. Ethan took a sip of coffee and leaned back in the rocking chair. "The village thinks it's all over, that the curse has been buried forever." Samuel let out a bitter laugh. "But it hasn't, has it?" Ethan stared at the horizon, his jaw set. "I know this kind of thing, Sam. We can cover up the hole, hide the evidence, tell a pretty story to the population. But the truth always finds a way to come back." Samuel nodded. "And if those creatures survived? And if there are more of them in other caves?" Ethan threw his head back and let out a frustrated sigh. "Then we're screwed." They laughed, but without humor. The weight of the truth crushed them. Samuel pulled from his pocket a small metal plate he had found in the cave before the collapse. He carefully cleaned it and revealed an almost erased inscription. "Project Gargoyle. Subject 01. Completed. Subjects 0208. In development." Samuel's breath caught in his throat. "Subject 01, he murmured. Ethan leaned forward. "What is it?" Samuel turned the plate towards him. "Subject 01. Completed. That means the monster we faced was the first. But the others were in development." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "You think that?" Samuel looked at the dense forest that stretched to the horizon. "I think Project Gargoyle didn't end there." A shiver ran down his spine. If there was a Subject 01, then where were the others? Months passed since Samuel left Appalachia shortly after the events in the mine. He returned to New York, resuming his life as a forensic biologist. He tried to bury everything that happened, but it never left him alone. He spent sleepless nights researching Project Gargoyle. He found nothing in the official government records, no mention, no evidence. It was as if it had never existed. Until one day, he received an email. The sender was unknown. No name, no title, just a short subject. "You are too close." Samuel felt his stomach turn as he opened the message. There was no text, just an attachment. He clicked. It was an old document dated 1953 with the stamp of the United States Department of Defense. And right at the top of the page, it read, "Project Gargoyle, updated location," and below, a single name. "Subject 002, active, last location, Alaska." Samuel felt his body tremble. Project Gargoyle hadn't ended. It had just moved. And somewhere in the world, there were more monsters waiting to be found. What did you think of this ending? Leave your opinion in the comments. We love to know what you think. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your like to support our work. See you in the next video.